Welcome back, everybody, to College Football Red Zone, and we find ourselves on the precipice of championship weekend, at least for all of the conferences in the FBS. And in today's video, I really wanted to take a minute to not only break down, and kind of react to what I had in the mid-season point, which was predictions that I didn't necessarily put out on the YouTube channel, but they were posted on my Twitter page. And then also talking about the conference championship games themselves in regards to who I think is going to win each conference championship and what kind of ramification is that going to have, at least on the national stage, because I do like to focus, on the national level here on College Football Red Zone. So hopefully you guys enjoy this video, man. And if you do, make sure you go ahead, do a couple of favors for me, hit that like button, and then also hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. And with that being said, man, let's go ahead and start getting into it. And we're going to go ahead and get things started here, really taking a hard look at what I had in at the midway point of the season. This was about like week 7 or week number 8 of the college football season, where I put out my mid-season predictions in terms of who I think is going to win each like individual conference, as well as updated record predictions for every team. But that part's not important. What is important though is, what did I have for me mid-season point of the conference for conference championship weekend? And there was a few games, that we were able to hit right on the head or were actually really close, right? So a few games that, we got the exact matchup that we were looking for. The Big Ten, we nailed that with Ohio State and Indiana. The SEC, we had Alabama and Georgia. Shout out to Texas A&M. They lost that game to Texas, which did open up a door, I believe, for Georgia to make the SEC championship. And then for the Sun Belt, it's James Madison. They were your East Division winner, and Troy ends up being your West Division leader. So, there was those free games right there where, hey, we nailed that right on the head, and we were even close in a few others. Right, like we thought we were gonna have. Duke did make the ACC title game. Miami did not. I thought Miami was going to win the ACC the way that they were looking at the midway point in the season. But what happened was Miami, they did lose a couple of those games to Louisville as well as SMU, and because of tiebreakers instead of the Miami Hurricanes, they did have the Virginia Cavaliers instead going to the ACC title game. Virginia with the better record, and then Duke getting in based on tiebreakers. Miami was in a position to make the ACC title game. Utah was really close to making the Big 12 championship as well. This was before the Holy War matchup. And BYU did end up winning the Holy War matchup. BYU also only carrying one loss in Big 12 conference play. Utah just having that bad luck in terms of playing both Texas Tech and BYU, losing to both of those teams. So they were one game short as well. Very good football team out there in Utah, a team that honestly should get a little bit more consideration for the college football playoff than they are. I have them as a bubble team right now, but it is what it is. And then for Maction in the Mountain West, Maction, I thought that way that Western Michigan was playing at that point in the year. I thought Western Michigan, they had a path to make it to Detroit for the MAC championship. And so Western Michigan, I had them winning the MAC at that point in the year. They did, in fact, make it to Detroit. And then Boise State, I thought was the best team in the Mountain West. It was a little ugly for the Broncos, definitely, don't get me wrong, but Boise State does find its way in to the Mountain West. Really, the only big miss that we have among those three conferences I talked about was not Boise State, Bowling Green. Bowling Green, I really liked their path at that time, but then Bowling Green really fell apart. They end up losing 5 of their last 6 games of the season. Their only win coming against UMass, the Minutemen, far and beyond the worst team in the FBS. So that was a big miss on my part on Bowling Green. San Diego State, they did control their own destiny. They had an opportunity to host the Mountain West title game. But what happened was they lost that game last week against New Mexico it came down to really what the computer models were thinking, and those computer models that the Mountain West were using viewed Boise State and UNLV to go and play in the Mountain West title game. So Boise State is going to host from that standpoint. And then we even had a couple of more major misses. Probably the two biggest misses I had was the American and Conference USA Championship. In the American, I had Memphis and University of South Florida, but those two teams are not in the American title game. Both couple of inexplicable losses. Memphis, they had that really head scratching loss to UAB. They also lose to Navy as well, and they had, I believe, a third loss that they suffered in American Conference play. So that was a rough conference slate for the Memphis Tigers, and then USF. They had one more impressive non-conference schedules, but what happened to USF? Really kind of the same thing, right? USF, one of those teams where they had a couple of somewhat confusing and inexplicable losses, like the Miami loss, perfectly understandable, and then they lose to Memphis on the road. They lose to Navy on the road as well. You flip those two games, you're talking about an 11-1 USF squad and a premium G5 contender for the college football playoff, a team that's pretty well equipped to maybe beat one of these playoff teams, but we're never going to find out. And then for Conference USA, I had Louisiana Tech playing Western Kentucky in the conference championship, and for Louisiana Tech definitely suffered a few losses in conference play. They lost to Kennesaw State by a blowout. And then they lose a couple of other games that were really close, 1 point losses. Barely losing to Western Kentucky, and then they also barely lose to Delaware as well. Just two games that they had, and then Western Kentucky, they did control their own destiny. They had a chance to host the Conference USA title game. All they had to do was beat Jacksonville State. It was a shootout, and yeah, Western Kentucky couldn't get it done. They lose. So, this is what we have in terms of conference championship weekend. So, starting things off on Friday. Friday is going to be Troy versus James Madison for the Sun Belt title. Kennesaw State's taking on Jacksonville State for the Conference USA crown. North Texas and Tulane are going to meet up in a ranked battle for the American title. UNLV is going to take on Boise State in the Mountain West title game, and that's going to be your Friday matchups. Those are all games that are going to be hosted by a specific college team. So James Madison, Jacksonville State, Tulane, and Boise State, they're all going to be hosting. And then your Saturday conference title games, those are actually all going to be neutral sites. So BYU's taking on Texas Tech. That's happening in Arlington, Texas. Miami is taking on Western Michigan up in Detroit. Georgia and Alabama, the SEC title game, of course, in Atlanta. And then your last two games that are going to be happening is Indiana and Ohio State. That is going to be your Big Ten title. And then Duke and Virginia. That is going to be your ACC title game, and that's going to be happening in Charlotte. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and check out what we had in terms of what is going to be our conference championship predictions. Who do I think is going to win these particular conferences? And for most of these, to be honest with you, based upon what I did for my midseason predictions, it's going to be mostly the same because I am choosing to be loyal to what I had in terms of midseason predictions, and I don't see a ton of reason for change. So starting with, I guess what I have is kind of like my most confident pick in terms of what I'm not really changing into the least confident. So starting off with Texas Tech, I do think BYU is a good enough football team and a very well coached football team as well to at least keep it close, and I think that it's going to be a more competitive game than what we saw earlier in the season. And this is a rematch between these two teams that did play each other in the regular season. Texas Tech did dominate with a 29-7 victory. I think this time around, I do think that at least BYU is going to be able to keep it closer. I think they're going to show some improvement. And obviously, if BYU, they need to win this game to be 100% in. I think Texas Tech is in no matter what. It's going to be really interesting to see, though, what happens to BYU if they lose this game, But let's say they lose this game really close, and I think their resume is going to show that they are worthy of being at least seriously considered in the conversation. So I'm very curious to see how BYU is handled if it is a close loss. But for now, I am going to stay with Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech, they've dominated teams all year long. I do think that Texas Tech should win somewhat comfortably, just a lot more talent than what BYU has, and I think they're going to be able to limit Bear Bachmeier. So Texas Tech, I have them winning the Big 12. SEC, not the SEC. Let me go in a different direction. The Sun Belt. This is a game where I do think that the Sun Belt. I don't. This might be the least competitive conference championship game that we do end up seeing. James Madison, I think they're gonna handle Troy pretty handily. I would not be surprised if this ends up being a blowout. Not that Troy is a bad football team. I actually think Troy is a very solid football team. They're obviously at least a solid squad, given that they made the Sun Belt title. But James Madison, they're just on another level right now. I think personally, they're the best G5 team in the country. And I think they're the most well-equipped team to really give some of these power conference teams in the college football playoff a run for their money. Now, James Madison obviously is going to need some help. They need Duke to beat Virginia in the ACC title. With that being said, though, I think James Madison, I think this is a team that obviously is very good on the defensive side of the football. And then offensively, they figured things out since the Louisville loss, which I know doesn't look as good now that Louisville's faded in the back end of the year. But you got to think that James Madison, they were figuring out that quarterback position. They got it solidified. They're sticking with Alonzo Barrett. And so now that the quarterback position is solidified, the offense is at a higher clip and, very capable of putting on some explosive performances as well. So James Madison, I think they're going to handle Troy pretty easily in that case. Alabama and Georgia. Alabama is kind of limping into this SEC title game a little bit more. Georgia playing a little bit better, but it's been one of those teams where you're looking at the Georgia Bulldogs. They have played with fire a couple of times when it comes to that Georgia Bulldogs team, and it's in like multiple different instances. It's not just a Georgia Tech matchup, right? But you're also looking at the Florida game. The Florida game was a really shaky performance for the Georgia Bulldogs. Ole Miss could have gone either way. Auburn was a little bit of a shaky performance for Georgia. Obviously, they had the loss already to Alabama. And the thing about that rematch that we saw from the regular season, Alabama was able to beat Georgia in their own stadium. They were able to break the longest home winning streak at the time between Alabama and Georgia, that Georgia home streak. So I think if Alabama is able to beat Georgia on the road, with this being a neutral site game, and I know this is a lot closer for Georgia fans, I have a reason to believe I think Alabama is going to win the SEC title. And this was also how I had things shaking out in the midseason predictions anyway. So I'm sticking with Alabama. Ohio State and Indiana, the number one versus number two team in the nation. I'm sticking with Ohio State, but I don't think this is going to be one of those cases where we do end up seeing Indiana cover against Ohio State. This is an incredibly well-coached team. Fernando Mendoza looks like a Heisman candidate, has a very good defense in their own right. And, Kurt Cinetti, honestly, Kurt Cinetti is just one of those coaches that you don't want to bet against very often here. Ohio State's been very good against the spread. I think their current record against the spread, 10-1-1 is their current record against the spread. So, something's got to give here. I am rolling with Ohio State, but I think this is going to be an incredibly competitive game in Indianapolis. I do think the talent is going to be a little bit too much, but I think Indiana will keep it close and they'll prove that, hey, this is a number two or, bare minimum, like a number three team in the country, a national championship contender in their own right. Very excited about that 1 versus 2 matchup, that's for sure. And then in terms of what I had in terms of same picks from the mid-season predictions, Boise State taking on UNLV. We saw this already. Boise State did beat UNLV back in the regular season. I do think UNLV, they've played better in the second half of the year, but given that, and Boise State has looked a little bit shakier down the back straight, but what I will say, this game, is taking place in Boise, Idaho. Boise State does have the championship pedigree as a whole, and there's a lot of players on that Boise State roster that not only won the Mountain West last year, but at the same time, they also have playoff experience as well. So I do think Boise State is not going to be pretty. I think UNLV is going to cover. I think that that defense is still going to be a tad bit too unreliable to get enough stops, I think, to win the game outright for UNLV. But I will take UNLV to cover, and I will go with Boise State winning. So Boise State winning, UNLV covering. And then the game that I think is going to be the most competitive of these conference championship games is the MAC. I am still rolling with Western Michigan, but I am really trying my best not to doubt Miami by any means. Miami under Chuck Martin. This is another program that has championship pedigree. And Miami, they've been in this spot plenty of times before where, for Western Michigan, it's a little bit of an unfamiliar spot. Lance Taylor in his first year with Western Michigan. I think Chuck Martin does have the coaching edge, but I do think Western Michigan at this point in the year is a little bit more intact. Whereas last time, even though Miami did beat Western Michigan in the regular season, that was when they still had their starting quarterback in DeQuan Finn. He is no longer with the program, so it's going to be a little bit more one-dimensional offensively for the Red Hawks. Excuse me. So I am going with Western Michigan there, getting the get back against Miami. Now, with that being said, a few more games I want to talk about: the ACC, the American, and Conference USA. So Conference USA, really interesting here. Conference USA, this is one of those conferences where I do think this is going to be a really competitive game. I think it's going to come down to the home stretch potentially. We saw this matchup happen earlier in the regular season, right? And it was a very competitive game here as well. They did beat Kennesaw State 35 to 26, and that's how Jacksonville State has been able to push forward and get home field advantage. But at the same time, though, Kennesaw State in their own right, they're having a really excellent season. They've rebounded nicely, getting a couple of solid wins. Getting Missouri State a win there at home, an overachieving Missouri State team. And then they do get the road win as well against Liberty. Liberty, I know, have an extremely disappointing year, but there's a lot of talent on that roster, so that's not as easy of a win as people look at Liberty. Look at a 4-8 team from the G5, and you're gonna write them off. No, that's still a solid football team. Just they haven't been able to put it together this year. So, with that being said, I do think that this game is going to be more competitive than what we saw in the regular season matchup. But at the end of the day, Jacksonville State as a program has been in this spot before. They are the defending conference champions. This game is happening as well in Jacksonville, Alabama. And because of that, I am going to roll with Jacksonville State to hold on and beat Kennesaw State here. I don't agree that Kennesaw State should be favored when we've seen this song and dance before. We will roll with Jacksonville State to win the Conference USA. American, this is actually a conference championship that I'm the most excited to watch this weekend. This is literally a winner go home. Like, think of it as a basically a play-in game for the college football playoff between North Texas and Tulane. Both teams ranked inside the top 25. But with that being said, neither of these teams, excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my throat. Neither of these teams really have any shot in that large bid. So it's either they win this game or they go home. Plus, we'll see how who's more dialed in here, right? Between North Texas and Tulane. North Texas head coach is heading off to Oklahoma State, while John Summerall, the Tulane head coach, he's heading off to Florida. We do have a data point with North Texas post the coaching change announcement, and they look like they're going to be fine. They blow out to the Temple, whereas we don't necessarily see that yet with Tulane. And to be honest with you, I do think Tulane is a little bit rich in terms of. I don't believe they're the 20th best team in the nation. I don't think necessarily they should be ranked in the top 25. I think North Texas should be the ones that should be hosting, to be honest with you, because that's how. Because they're only hosting because of the tiebreaker with Tulane getting more love from the CFP committee. I think North Texas offense is going to be too much to handle, and Jake Redshoff, I think, is going to make a critical mistake in the fourth quarter that'll have the Mean Green pull this one away. So we're going with North Texas winning the American, and then finally the ACC, the possible chaos conference. If Duke wins this game, guys, we are looking at not a single team from the ACC making the college football playoff, and that would be devastating for them as a power conference. However, we have seen this play out in the regular season before. Virginia does win 34 to 17, and all credit in the world to the Duke Blue Devils. I know there's been a lot of talk about Duke in terms of what they can do to shake up the national picture, but what's really gotten lost this week is just how amazing of a year that Virginia has had this year. Chandler Morris has played wonderful for his Virginia team. And Tony Elliott really should be coach of the year in the ACC. I really do believe that. Maybe national coach of the year. Raise your hand if you had Virginia going 10-2 in the preseason. But we've seen this song and dance before. And I think Duke is just one of those teams this year where, they beat who they're supposed to beat, and then when it comes to their bigger games, they usually are folding like a lawn chair. And I think this is going to be the case here as well. So I think Virginia wins. I do think Duke covers, though. I do think they play closer than what they did in the regular season. But I do think Virginia is still going to win this game. Duke will cover, and the doom scenario will be avoided narrowly. And Virginia will secure the 11th seed. So, guys, those are my conference championship predictions. Definitely let me know down in the comments section what you guys think. And with that being said, guys, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hope you guys are all out there having a good night. Take care, everybody.